So, Belgian Blonde Ale is similar to a few other Belgian beer styles. It is most similar to a triple or a Belgian Strong Golden Ale, but not as bitter. It has a similar alcohol strength as a double, but it's not as dark and bold. It's a complex beer, but not as complex as a lot of these other Belgian styles. That Belgian yeastiness is not as present here. I guess I'd be better off explaining what it is like, not what it isn't. We'll start with the overall impression. It says, a moderate strength golden ale that has a subtle, fruity spiced Belgian yeast complexity, slightly malty sweet flavor, and dry finish. That's essentially what I just said, right? The aroma on a Belgian Blonde Ale is lightly earthy or spicy. That's from the hops. It also has a light, grainy, sweet malt character. The yeast character is more subtle, as I said, and it may include spicy phenolics, perfume, or honey-like alcohol notes, or some yeasty, fruity esters. Usually citrus esters like oranges or lemons. There may also be a sweet, sugary character. It's a complex beer, but it's also subtle. Remember how important that word was when we talked about triples? Well, it's even more valid here. Subtle. The appearance is light to deep gold. Belgian Blonde Ales are generally very clear. It should have a large, dense, creamy white to off-white head, and it should also have good head retention with that classic Belgian lacing. All in all, it's a very pretty beer. This is a very smooth beer, by and large. It has a light to moderate, grainy sweet malt flavor up front, but it will finish dry or medium dry. You will probably get some light caramelized sugar or honey-like sweetness in there. You'll get some smooth alcohol in the aftertaste, but that's going to be the only real indication of how strong Belgian Blonde Ales tend to be. It's another Belgian beer style with a sneaky high ABV. You will get some hop and alcoholic bitterness to balance the grainy sweet maltiness. If you detect any hop flavor, it will be earthy or spicy, which is typical for a Belgian beer. Unlike many other Belgian styles though, this one has a very soft yeast character. What you do get will be perfumey or citrusy like oranges or lemons, and you may or may not get some light spicy phenols. Real quick, I want to go over some points about yeast. Now, there is a definite Belgian yeast character that you get in Belgian beers. It is distinct and pronounced and complex. But there's not just one kind of Belgian yeast. There are a number of different strains, and they all have their own separate characteristics. Belgian pale ale strains are fairly neutral, so much so that you can substitute a clean American ale strain if you can't get your hands on a Belgian strain. That's more for homebrewers, and I'm not trying to step on Thomas's toes here, but sometimes I know things about homebrewing too. Abbey and Trappist strains are where you get those really pronounced fruity esters and spicy phenols that characterize what most people think of when they think of a Belgian beer. Belgian strong ale yeast strains are made to handle the high ABV of those beers. Then there's wit beer yeast, which imparts a tart, fruity flavor. That works really well with the coriander and orange peel typically added to that style of beer. And Saison strains have a spicy character that can come across as cloves and pepper. They also have a dry tartness, similar to a wit beer yeast, but this yeast is way more resilient than most other strains. It can ferment at temperatures in the 90s. This isn't a cumulative list of Belgian yeast strains, but it's a good start. There are tons more, including strains for lambics and other sours. And some of those are wild yeast strains, which are a whole other kind of thing. We talked about Brettanomyces in our Flanders Red episode, but there are multiple strains of Brett. There's Brettanomyces clauseni, Brettanomyces bruxellensis. That's all I can think of. That still counts as multiple strains though, technically. The point is, just because people talk about a classic Belgian beer taste, there's really more variety than you might think. There are even some strains of Belgian lager yeast, because everyone makes some version of a macro lager. Belgium, for instance, makes Stella Artois, also known as proof that having a fancy branded glass doesn't make your beer taste any better. Not that Stella is bad, it's just nothing. It's a nothing beer, like a Bud Light or a PBR. Anyway, back to Belgian Blonde Ale. Where are we even at? Mouthfeel? I think we're at mouthfeel. Some people hate the word mouthfeel. They think it sounds gross or pervy, like they do with the word moist. I don't get that. I think mouthfeel is a perfect way to describe the sensation of how a thing feels in your mouth. It's such a succinct way to say that. Mouthfeel. So fuck off if you don't like that word. It's a great word. Mouthfeel. The mouthfeel of a Belgian Blonde Ale features medium high to high carbonation. It can feel like the bubbles are filling your mouth sometimes, it's so carbonated. It has a medium body, not too heavy, but there's definitely some heft there. You will detect some light to moderate alcohol warmth, but it will be very smooth. It can even be somewhat creamy, which is not a typical Belgian characteristic. These beers can have an almost lager-like character, which gives it a cleaner profile in comparison to many other Belgian styles. This is an important distinction because the impetus behind Belgian Blonde Ale's creation is the same as that of Belgian Triple, Belgian Golden Strong Ale, and Belgian Pale Ale. If you recall from our Belgian Triple episode, they were created in response to the popularity of other pale beers from Britain, Germany, and the Czech Republic. It is often hard to differentiate these four similar beer styles. Fuck, it's hard to find any information on which beer style came first. Well, okay, I would guess the Triple was first, but after that it's anyone's guess. Either way, the Belgian Blonde Ale is a fairly new beer style as far as Belgian beers go. It is less than 100 years old. That's not much in the way of a history lesson, but we've essentially covered everything you need to know in the Belgian Triple episode, so I'm just going to move on to characteristic ingredients. The BJCP lists quite a few ingredients here. Belgian Pilsner malt, aromatic malts, which are a type of specialty malt that contribute a lot of rich malty flavors. The most well-known aromatic malt is the Munich malt. They're typically used in Bocks, brown ales, Munich Dunkels. Anyway, also listed is sugar and Belgian yeast strains that produce complex alcohol, phenolics, and perfumey esters. But wait, there's more. It also mentions Saaz, Syrian Golding, or East Kent Golding hops. These are all earthy, spicy hop varieties that can contribute additional complexity to Belgian beers. Spices are not traditionally used, although the ingredients and fermentation byproducts may give an impression of spice. This is often reminiscent of oranges or lemons. If, however, spices are present, they should be a background character only. Let's see. I think I've covered style comparisons already, but the guide says Belgian Blonde Ale is similar in strength to a double, with a similar character as a Belgian Golden Strong Ale or Triple, although a bit sweeter and not as bitter. Fair enough. Lastly, we have vital statistics. IBU ranges from 15 to 30, so pretty low. SRM is from 4 to 7, which would be yellow to a very light amber color. And the ABV range goes from 6 to 7.5%. Pretty high for such a smooth, drinkable beer style. There are tons of commercial examples that are worth checking out. Many of the ones I've tried were previously available in the St. Louis area, but aren't anymore. You can still get the Left Blonde, but that's really about it. I thought Duvel was one, but it's a fucking Belgian Golden Strong Ale, dummy. But if you can find a Grimbergen Blonde, or a La Trappe Blonde, or an Affligem Blonde, or a fucking Augustigen Blonde, or however you pronounce that word, do yourself a favor and drink them shits. Honestly, I can't think of a single craft example of this that I would recommend. Perennial says that their Southside Blonde is a sessionable Belgian-style blonde ale, but I think that's just their way of making it seem like a more interesting beer than it really is. From my recollection, it tastes nothing like a Belgian Blonde. It's very American tasting. I don't know, maybe I drank mine too cold. And really, I think that's going to wrap it up for the Belgian Blonde Ale. I feel like I meandered around a bit on this one, but that's part of the fun, right? If you think that was a winding narrative, just wait until we throw Thomas into the mix. He and I get distracted very easily, don't you know? So we'll see how this one goes. We'll take a break, and then we'll see what Thomas has to say about Belgian Blonde Ales. Stick around.